Hey guys, I sent you guys a PowerPoint presentation of my thoughts on what we should be looking at and executing for Healing America Foundation. I want to continue to connect the dots between Healing America, perception, which is the threat, and then our children's inheritance, which is what we're trying to safeguard. While perception is not reality, it is eroding the fiber of our Constitution and our way of life quicker than any enemy could ever do. And if we don't act now, our grandchildren will soon inherit a country far worse than the America we inherited from our grandparents. Every war, conflict, injury, and casualty we've ever endured as a nation will all be marginalized if our grandchildren cannot live out their dreams in accordance with our 1776 Declaration of Independence. That being said, let's go to slide 2 and I will get through this as quick as possible. So you look at this slide here, I want you to read it from the bottom all the way up because we're founded at what you see there at the bottom. First of all, let me explain vision. It is, as said here, the desired future. What do we see ourselves doing in the future, or better said, where do we see ourselves at in the future? So what are we trying to drive to? And it is as listed here in America, whereby our grandchildren can embrace their talents, reach their goals, and live out their dreams, period. And because of that vision, we now can adopt this mission or this cause or this purpose here. Our mission, as stated here, is to heal America by restoring our core values of honor, excellence, and strength. And we will speak to all three of those core values. Because of that mission, we now can adopt some goals. So our goals, as listed here, are: number 1, honor those who have served our great nation. Number 2, inspire our youth to be the best versions of themselves. And number 3, change the narrative and the perception in our country. Now, those are 3 goals. There are probably other goals out there we can look at, but we need to really speak clearly and concisely about who we are, what we're doing. And these goals we're already doing, okay? But the Evangelo Morris LLC can only do so much but Healing America can really put some muscle on that person there, and we can kind of get after much more. Because of these goals, we will have to do tasks. So the tasks are not philosophical. The tasks are exactly the action items that we're physically going to be doing. So people can look at the money that they're giving us and say, okay, they're actually getting after this because they're doing this and they're doing that and that. So these 3 things that we're physically actually going to do, the action items, the tasks are: conduct live performances and speaking engagements nationally and locally. We already do that, but again, we're going to put some more muscle to that. Number 2, run 24/7 influence campaigns on social media and media platforms. I do that a little bit, but as one person, it can only do so much. But you get the Healing America Foundation involved, they're going to really put a lot of muscle on that. Okay, and then number 3, host key leader engagements in the local community and nationally. I do that, small scale, but again, muscle is going to be put on that as well. Now, let's move on to the next slide. This is what I call the bread and butter slide. This is taking the tasks and really just defining them, breaking them out by defining the who, what, where, and the why of each of the 3 tasks. You can see there at the bottom, that's task number 1, and you can see task number 2 on the left there in blue, and then you can see task number 3 in red on the right at the top. And each of those have their breakouts of who, what, where, and why. So you can see that and read that for yourselves. But if I just kind of look at one of them, look to the right there in red, you see task number 3. And all these notes are in the PowerPoint. So you can read through all of my notes and see exactly what we're going after there. But if you look at task number 3, the who, the target audience, key leaders, and stakeholders, influencers. So these key leaders are going to be your pastors, your nonprofit organization leaders, corporate leaders, business owners and leaders, politicians, and also you'll have sorority leaders, fraternity leaders, college deans, if any of those folks are in the area, the sheriff in the area, or any other leaders that may be there, to include the school superintendent. So any leaders in that area. Now, that's locally, but for nationally, the main thing that we're going to do is create momentum. We're going to create momentum builders. And the main momentum builder that we're going to create is a Healing America Foundation Gala. Okay, that gala is where we're going to invite all of the key leaders that we can at the highest level, politicians, anyone we can get to get inside of this gala, support it, raise the awareness, and also define again who we are and really talk about the results of what we have been doing. And that will generate spin and momentum. And I can see that gala getting bigger and bigger every year. It may only start out with maybe 100 people the first year, but then by the 5th year, you may be up to 1,000 or maybe even 5,000 people. So we have to think like that. Let's move on. So the next thing I want to talk here briefly is a slide that really explains the threat, which I talked about earlier, is perception. So we talked about the task, we talked about the goals and all of that, but let's talk about the threat, because when people give, sometimes they don't want just to have a good, warm and fuzzy talking point. They want to know, what's the threat? So what are we going after? And then why are we going after this threat? So, which we've already talked about. So here we have, look at this here slide here. You see at the top of it, it's called the American dosage problem. Okay, so, and you can see 4 blocks associated with this slide up top. One is in red. So you have, from the top, you have political gridlock over the top left, and then the bottom, below that, you have social influence. Notice that's in red. We'll get back to that later. And then over to the right, at the bottom, you have economic divide, and then at the top right, you have racial tension. All 4 of those are influencers that's pouring into this big funnel of information. So now, if you look at the social influence in red, I want to put that one in red because of the 4, I am saying that you can't truly impact none of the 4 except for the influence. Political gridlock is always going to be there. You can talk until you're blue in the face. You're not going to change the political gridlock. Also, the racial tension. It's a real thing. We've had racial tension since the beginning of mankind. You're not going to stop racial tension. And then you have economic divide. You always have the poor among you. You're always going to have rich. You're always going to have middle class. You're not going to stop that. So the only thing that you can contribute to really is the influence. And we want to really paint how deep that problem is of perception. Look over to the bottom right. You see perception just quietly over there, but it's connected. It's connected to the information. What that's telling you is that it doesn't necessarily mean that America is as bad as people are saying it is. It just means that that's what they perceive. And that's the problem. That's a problem because below that, you see the see, think, do. That whole process is what how we influence other nations. Now, the military doesn't influence Americans this way, but we do influence other nations. We give them information so that it can be a perception. They're going to see it or hear it or both. And then they're going to think about it, try to understand it, and then they're going to do something. And when they do something, it's going to look like that photo below where you see the lady says it's a 6 on the ground and the man says it's a 9 on the ground. Which one is it? Well, from where the man is standing, it's a 9. But from where the lady's standing, it's a 6. So which one of them are right? That's the whole point, is influence will make you think that you're right from where you're standing. So what's the end result? Is something that you may not desire, which is below that. You see, for us, a threatened inheritance for our kids. And that's the whole point that we're trying to make. Perception is the biggest threat in America. And what it's going to ultimately do is take away our inheritance from our children. I want to point out too, if you look to the bottom left, you'll see the core values sitting down there. but it's not connected to anything. So you have honor, excellence, and strength. It's a reality. That's who we are, but it's not connected to anything. So that's never making it into this whole process. So let's go one slide over and we will see how that's going to connect in. This slide is just like the one before, except it is connected. Our honor, excellence, and strength is connected. The core values is connected. That's funneling into the influence. Now, I want to say this. This is a very important point I want to make. Influence is real. Take, for example, Facebook. Let's say that Facebook existed back when Jesus was born. Now, this comment is not a religious comment, but I want to drive this point. If Facebook was around when Jesus was born, and let's say you was around, and when he was born, you sent 1,000 messages on Facebook. And then the second day, that since Jesus has been here, you sent another 1,000. And you sent 1,000 messages every day for his whole first year. And then second year all the way until he died, and all the way past that to Napoleon, all the way past Napoleon to George Washington, all the way to today. 1,000 messages every day. You still would not have reached 1 billion messages. You would not have reached 1 billion messages. Facebook, however, is sending 5 billion messages every single day. So you couldn't have reached that number sending 1,000 a day every day from when Jesus was born, but somehow Facebook is pushing out 5 billion, just about 5 billion, 4.75 billion every single day. The point that I'm making is we have to tap into these sources of influence. So the second to the last slide is kind of a Simon Says kind of block slide there. You see, but what is focusing on something very important, the themes. We can change our themes and messages later, but under the overall message of Healing America, we have sub-themes which are as listed here. Number 1, be the best version of yourself. Number 2, to the right there at the top right, is learn the value of freedom and liberty. Number 3, embrace your talents and dreams. And then number 4, to the bottom right, let's make patriotism cool again. And I went ahead and assigned a category for each of those themes. So you see the yellow is focusing on Gen Y and Gen X. Gen Y is the millennials, and Gen X is my generation. And down below that, you see let's make patriotism cool again. That's focusing on my generation and also the baby boomers. Okay, for good reason, because we need to really lead that charge of making patriotism cool again. I think that's something that we can lead. But then if you look at the bottom left, you see embrace your talents and dreams. We really want to focus on Gen Z and Gen Y. Gen Z are those 13-year-olds to like mid-20s roughly. Now, let's move on to our final slide here. You see, we have to have a way to measure our performance and measure our effectiveness, so you can kind of look at that. And we need to do this because we need the folks that's contributing money to us to be able to know that their money is being put to good use. So you can see what I wrote there for how we can measure our performance, through branding, marketing, blogging, interviews, how well you do Old Glory or how well you do your keynote address. They can measure what you're doing. Okay, and then for effectiveness, it really speaks to something different. Just because you perform well, you could have just really put your all in all into it, but that doesn't mean it was effective. So we have to have ways to measure the effectiveness of it as well. And that effectiveness could be things that's listed there, testimonials, even the GPA. When we go to schools and we're speaking to all of these high schools and middle schools, and they're kind of like a pilot program, we can come back to them a year later and say, hey, how's the GPAs looking? How's the dropout rates going for those schools? They know, 1, we care, and 2, we're measuring the effectiveness of what we're doing. All right, and then at the bottom there, bottom left, you see numerical goals. We can get out and say, hey, we want to reach so many people per year via online, and then we want to reach another amount of people in person. And lastly, we have our alliance, simply showing that we are connected to the churches, we're connected to the nonprofit organizations, corporations, and we want to show that connection is growing, people and places and things. We're gaining things. We're, moving to more places. Maybe we have an overseas reach, kind of like what USO does. They not only have a lot of events here for veterans here in America, but they will go over into war zones and do events. So we want to continue to show that alliance of people, places, and things, and corporations and organizations. Thank you for your time. I hope that you found this helpful.